We have been told over and over again that competition is coming, that legacy automakers will eventually flex their muscle and get into the EV race. So where are they? The market has clearly told them that this is the future, and entire governments have told them to phase out their existing products. Yet none of them have produced any significant volumes of product relative to their internal combustion engine sales. VW has managed to eke out 292,000 vehicles as of Q3 2021. Hyundai has clocked 140,000, and GM can't really claim second spot because it is really the SAIC partnership in China that is doing all the heavy lifting with their 411,000 vehicles sold. So far, Ford has managed to sell 51,000 Mach-E's this year as of Q3. Now, this is all pocket change when compared to Tesla, which has so far sold 627,000 vehicles, and all indications are they're going to break records again in Q4. And that is without two giant gigafactories that are coming online. Yet analysts are praising Ford, GM, and VW and celebrating their success. I think analysts have not truly understood the nature of disruptive innovation, and I want to use this video to share my thoughts. In 1980, one of Harvard's most famous professors, Michael E. Porter, wrote a book called Competitive Strategy: Techniques for Analyzing Industries and Competitors, in which he introduced the world to Porter's 5 forces. 4 of them are kind of boring, but the 5th is relevant to what is going on today, which is the threat of substitution. Anyone who has ever studied business-related degrees has learnt the famous case studies of companies that were forced to adapt due to substitution. Encyclopedia Britannica, for example, a 244-year-old institution that had to go digital. Or how Red Bull started mucking up coffee sales by giving people alternative ways to stay awake. Or how margarine enabled us to digest our toast a little bit easier than by using butter. But in Porter's definition, substitution was really just about addressing a customer's need with a different product. It didn't really describe what would happen when technologies came about that just completely changed the rules of the game. In 1995, Clayton Christensen and Joseph Bauer, through a famous paper they published, introduced us all to the notion of disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is far more profound than substitution. We are no longer simply swapping out a product for another. We are changing the need entirely. Disruptive innovation creates industry. It doesn't just displace it. Famous examples of this principle are companies like Canon, who introduced us to the notion of small copiers, or Bill Gates and Microsoft, who introduced us to software that made personal computing possible for the layman, or Apple that revolutionized the personal computing market. So why do I think electric vehicles in general, and Tesla in particular, are disruptive? Well, there are 4 reasons. First up is the fuel itself. I've mentioned this many times before. EVs are replacing a primary energy source, oil, with a secondary one, electricity. And the reason this is disruptive is not only because of the reduction in running costs of a vehicle, it also completely changes our patterns of use. You see, the oil industry has for a century now been able to perfect its supply chain, and the automotive industry has been able to flourish because nobody has ever had to worry about where we would refuel our vehicles. The infrastructure was just there. But for Tesla, as the pioneer of the EV industry, the infrastructure it needed was non-existent. It had to create its own. And this investment has now given them a substantial head start. Tesla has been able to deposit their brand everywhere, with over 25,000 charging stations, plus home charging options that they can package. This ability to offer integrated charging solutions for its vehicle owners is a huge competitive advantage. Apple has for a decade now proven how powerful it can be to have this level of seamless integration across product portfolios. Ford, for example, has recognized the importance of this and has worked to create its own infrastructure, along with partnerships with third-party companies. But the problem here is that this infrastructure costs money, and it needs a critical mass of vehicles to generate an ROI. Ford is sorely lacking in the latter, and its partnerships with third-party companies limit its ability to discount charging or to package it with a vehicle sale. I should also mention that no other vehicle manufacturer can provide integrated home power generation and storage options to the best of my knowledge. Next up is production. The auto industry is a mature industry, and the textbook strategy for improving efficiency and margin in mature industry is to outsource. Auto manufacturers have also for decades perfected the art of horizontal integration. In other words, the acquisition of businesses that operate in the same level of the value chain, i.e., other automotive brands. Efficiencies are gained by standardizing parts across each of the product lines, and then outsourcing the production of those parts so that the cost of maintaining production efficiency of the part no longer becomes their concern. Now, this type of strategy is effective in a mature industry. In fact, it is pretty much essential. But you see, Tesla is not facing a mature industry. Tesla is disrupting one, and has basically given itself the entire automotive industry as its total accessible market, or TAM. Tesla is not playing with the same rulebook, and has an aggressive strategy of vertical integration. Now, vertical integration comes with a risk. Let's take the actual motor, for instance. If Tesla has the capacity to manufacture, say, 1 million of these, then all is good up until the point Tesla needs an extra 100,000 of them. Now Tesla will have to build a second 1 million unit factory line to obtain economies of scale, and will be sitting with overproduction of 900,000 units. This kind of step change makes vertical integration risky, but when you're dealing with exponential growth in production and the total accessible market that Tesla is working with, that step change risk is currently negligible. But it is not a negligible issue for a legacy auto manufacturer, as their entire philosophy and culture is geared towards outsourcing. They are going to have to perform a complete cultural shift to adopt a similar strategy, and there are countless MBA case studies testifying to how phenomenally difficult this is. Just look at how hard Herbert Diess is finding it at VW. In fact, general consensus in MBA theory is that the best strategy is to simply ring-fence your existing business and start a new one from scratch, where you can build teams not hamstrung by your traditional mindset. Now, if they choose not to pivot, then they will have the double whammy of A, having to battle margins by absorbing third-party input costs, and, more importantly, will have to work to the pace of their slowest supplier, something that can have devastating consequences, as the recent chip shortages have demonstrated. There's also the small matter of designing a brand new vehicle from the ground up with production efficiency in mind. When you have a track record of horizontal integration, this kind of efficiency was not important. Standardization was the goal. Now we have a company that has figured out how to improve efficiencies with the gigapress, along with metal alloys that make such casting possible. Then there is the structural battery pack, the wiring, and even the paint techniques. Tesla's entire DNA is built around production efficiency. Legacy Auto has a huge hurdle to overcome if they are to set aside their traditional way of doing things and recognize this. Before I go to by far the most important disruption, I wanted to bring up point number 3, which is branding. There's been a lot of discussion around the Osborne effect, and I won't cover that further. No, I'm more interested in how difficult auto manufacturers are going to find it to pivot into a field they are simply not known for. Traditionally, this was never an issue for an auto manufacturer. They simply acquired companies that developed product for new market sectors. Think BMW buying Mini to enter the subcompact market, or Chrysler buying Jeep. But this won't work now, as most of the pure EV brands are too big now for legacy auto brands to pursue. So no, they're going to have to build their own. And most of them are starting with luxury models, since this is easier to make margin with. The problem for them is that the Tesla brand is now incredibly powerful. Tesla literally has entire governments lobbying them to have their factories locally built. And they have $130,000 vehicles outperforming $3 million supercars. A $130,000 Model S Plaid is a status symbol, while the Model Y is becoming the world's most popular vehicle. And then we have the Cybertruck with its reported 1 million unit pre-order threatening the pickup truck segment. Perhaps the Tesla Semi should also get mentioned here. So Legacy Auto have to develop their own brands in this context, and will be plagued by issues like the Chevy Bolt recall, which just sows further doubt into the consumer's mind as to whether they are able to make such specialized machines. Now, I want to put one caveat here. I think Ford, with its Mustang Mach-e, is making a bold move with one of the world's most underutilized brands. The Mustang is legendary, and Ford has done the right thing, pivoting their most iconic brands, the F-150 and the Mustang, into the world of EVs. I hope it works for them. But by far the biggest disruptive innovation is the pace of innovation itself. By the time competition has ramped up their production to put sufficient vehicles in the field, Tesla will have FSD deployed. Now legacy autos will have a new issue to deal with, that they are putting a dramatically inferior product into the field. FSD gives Tesla an enormous amount of optionality. I mean, If we look beyond just the robo-taxi style use cases and think how this could be packaged for consumers, I can totally see an environment where Tesla sells FSD with dedicated packaged use cases, such as, say, full self-parking or pay-per-use scenarios such as time of day access, or we could have ancillary use cases sold in conjunction, such as auto insurance. Now, I mentioned earlier in this video that true disruptive technology creates industry, and I believe that Tesla's production capability plus the technology advancements in full self-driving are going to do exactly that. There are a number of practical reasons why consumers would not buy an automobile. Many of them relate simply to affordability and total cost of ownership, and we know that Tesla has a clear strategy for addressing that. But there are more practical considerations why many of us would not own a vehicle, or why many families would only own one. Where to park a vehicle, for example, is a major consideration, especially those living in built-up cities. Now, we can totally envision a scenario how full self-driving would solve that problem. So yes, I think full self-driving is totally going to create additional need and create additional markets that were previously not there. The options are endless, and with Tesla's innovative abilities, it is a certainty that they will be dreaming up all kinds of use cases. This is ultimately what all other auto manufacturers are going to be dealing with. A company that will treat its car as a platform for services that are going to be more and more essential to our everyday lives. A company with skills, design philosophy, and a giant head start in autonomous driving. And while they try to catch up with the software, Tesla will be moving on to the next thing. And with that kind of a team and with such a visionary leader, who knows what that could be? Good luck catching up with that. Thank you for listening. If you like this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed to my channel.